And then with the rebar, and obviously like years ago, I don't know how long rebars existed, but you always see people throwing in metal scraps, whatever, they'll just chuck stuff in there. What's some of the craziest things you've seen that someone, like you come to a site and they've just got like all the metal and they're throwing stuff in left, right, and center?
Kitchen sinks, yeah. Anything steel. How about that?
We used to live in Headley as kids.
Yep.
And there's the ruins of the old mine on the side of the mountain. We lived in a trailer at the base of that. And we played in those ruins as kids all the time. And it's all rubble and broken and breaking down now. And there's chunks of, where they had all these concrete walls all over the place. And it's all crumbled and broken. And there's giant rocks in it. And there's pieces of pipe and scrap. Yeah. There's just all kinds of debris. Because it just adds tensile strength and holds it together.
Yeah, and I mean, back in the day too, really large rocks.
Yeah,
huge rocks.
Boulders.
I mean, you look at old foundations. I know my house, when I cut the windows in there, the foundation's got rocks in it. They're like 6-inch minus in there, right? Yeah. So, handy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Efficient by Design podcast. I'm here again with my brother Brad, co-hosting, and a very special guest, Jason Seddon, it's pretty remarkable. He's able to be in here on a weekday morning because he owns the local ready mix plant, SRM Concrete, which is like a block away. You're right there. I can see their towers for their plant. So he has come in and we're going to talk through a bit of his background and then the whole reality of the industry and trade of concrete and working with it, which is super fascinating because, having been in the trades and built hundreds of homes, my experience and perspective of concrete and what it takes to work with and the pressure and anxiety that it creates is unlike anything else in the building of a structure. It's so ridiculously unforgiving. You got one shot and you can make a huge mess. And if you do make a mess, it's incredibly expensive. It's expensive if things go well.
Yeah.
If things go bad, it's a huge mess. You see these YouTube videos and fail videos of blowouts happening and slabs, forming, collapsing, and this river of concrete flowing down a hill or into a parkade. And you're like, oh, that's a mess. No, that's turning into an unfinished slab somewhere.
Under slab.
Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy mess. So again, the reality of having you in to kind of talk through things, I don't take that lightly. We've been hoping to do this for a while, so I'm stoked to do it. We did an episode a while ago with a gentleman named Craig Meadow, who does design. So my hope is kind of we're working through different phases of a build. So I wanted to do design with Craig, talk about concrete with you, and then I want to get in a friend of mine that runs the general contractor's desk of probably home hardware in Penticton, and get through all the design and plans of floors and trusses and all that. So it should be a fun little series to keep working through. So a little bit about you and your background before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of concrete itself and the function and business of it. So where are you from, and what's your kind of brief history, like growing up and getting into trades at all?
Yeah, I was born in Whitehorse in Yukon. My dad was at RCMP up there. So we were there for 6 months, allegedly. And then they moved back to Penticton. My dad was born and raised here. Okay. So he ended up being a firefighter after he moved back and joined the department here, and then was there till he retired. So yeah, pretty much born and raised here in Penticton. Graduation, we went into work right away. Not really sure where that was going to lead me. Got in, just knew I needed to work, knew I'd like to work. I wasn't afraid of it, wanted to learn.
Well, I guess that from your dad being an RCMP and then a firefighter, like that's a pretty
he's a worker. He's always been like that. So, that was instilled in us for sure. My brother and I, just, to put the effort into those kinds of things. So always wanted to learn, wanted to look around, wanted to see the new things, worked locally after I graduated for a year, and then got on to a tire company for a few years, and then ended up getting a job offer to go work out in Ontario, Leadcore Industries, with some friends that I had.
So who is Leadcore? What do they do? Because I hear with them all the time. I know it's a huge company.
Yeah, massive, all kinds of facets coming off of there. We were in the fiber optic insulation we were doing. It's actually where I met my business partner currently. Okay. in 1998. Actually went to Ontario and left Penticton. The farthest I'd been is Calgary.
Really?
Yeah, went out to downtown Toronto for a 15-day shift and was like, wow.
Yeah. So you've been to Vancouver, I'm
yeah,
sure.
oh yeah, I've been to Vancouver lots, but if you've been to Toronto, that's like just another world out there of stepping up the city life.
Yeah.
So yeah, spent some time there, and then we went to Northern Ontario, drove all the way up to Long Lac, and we started installing fiber optic cable along the railroad right down back into Toronto, actually. The year after that, we went from the Windsor Tunnel all the way back to Toronto, and then we ended up in Manitoba another year. So we were back east for quite a while before we actually got a spot that came west through from Edmonton through Jasper, actually right to the BC border. So
your hope was to get back into BC at some point?
Well, we always wanted to be back closer to BC, but that was as close as we got. And then kind of shifted gears after that, came home for a little bit. Darcy and I ended up going and getting a job in Grand Prairie with a telecommunications company, doing the installs for TELUS. Did that for a year. And then kind of wanted to get back to Penticton, always seeing places and knowing where I wanted to finish my, or get settled in eventually. I loved the fact that I went to Ontario. I loved coming home still every time and always had a place here. Even when I had a place out there, this was home always, right? So it really helped to solidify for me the value of being in Penticton and the Okanagan and what it really offered and where essentially I wanted to have a family in the end would be raise my kids. I always tell people I went to a lot of places that I knew I never affirmed that I wanted to be here when I finished, right?
Yeah.
So I loved it. It was great to see it. I knew that wasn't where I wanted to be after being here. It was hard to replace it for me.
Is your brother in Okanagan as well?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's in Penticton as well. Yeah. So after that, I was home for a bit. I was my dad being in the fire department. I had joined the volunteer department here. I eventually went to fire school, like 2002, 2003. Completed that. Came home here. During that process, I'd got my Class 1 license so I could drive the trucks. So I got some experience with some people I knew in the Okanagan and, got married in 2004, came home from honeymoon, my wife's birthday, went and took out some resumes that day on our way to the beach to go hang out for a bit. And, I dropped one off at Conrock Ready Mix in Penticton and the owner came out, looked at it, my resume, looked at me, said, you had a lot of jobs. I said, yeah, I know. I'd never been fired. And he said, can you start today? And I said, I'm going to the beach with my wife for her birthday. How about tomorrow? He says, we'll see you at 9. So,
nice. That's a pretty sweet,
that was
sweet
it.
start. Yeah.
That's a pretty classic, stereotypical trades hire.
Yeah.
It's like you need guys, you have now, you're a warm body.
There was a strike on the union. So the other two competitors were not supplying any concrete all the way into Kelowna. And I had friends in the concrete industry, but I knew nothing about it. But I knew I could drive a truck and probably figure it out. So yeah, drop the resume, take the resume to his wife. She looks at it, goes, I'll go get my husband. He comes out, literally only pokes his head out around the door and looks at me, looks at the resume, looks at me, says, you had a lot of jobs. And I go, yeah, never been fired. What can I tell you? And that's it. He's like, all right, let's go. And so we were jumping in the trucks like 2 days later, hauling concrete up to Kelowna.
So you got hired on to deliver concrete immediately.
Right away. Let's go. Yeah.
Holy cow. That's a pretty heavy job to have right out of the gate.
6-meter truck, take it up to Kelowna, maybe 3 or 4 different stops. You never came back empty because of the strike. People were actually almost chasing you down, trying to buy the concrete out of the truck.
So like, were you given like a heads up? Like, don't let this keep the mixture going.
This is where you're going. Yeah. Like here, yeah. So you just keep it spinning, you shoot off to the side. That way, if you spill, it goes on the shoulder, not in the middle of the road. And see you back here in a bit, right?
Get
another load and turn around and go back to Kelowna. Like, and the construction was on at the highway.
Yeah, there was 2-lane highway
at the campground then too, right? They just started that section out there.
Okay, so for some context, for those of you watching and listening, Penticton is a town 15 minutes south of Summerland where we are now. And Kelowna is currently, it's about a 40-minute drive north of here on the 4-lane highway that there exists now. In 2004, it was a 2-lane sketchy.
Just starting the first phase of the construction. Yeah.
So 2-lane, super windy, accident-ridden, like one of the most dangerous highways in BC.
Yeah, it was.
At the time. It was brutal. So you go, how old were you then? Well, you've been...
Yeah, I was...
26?
I was, about that. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, I got married in 2004 as well. So I'm just thinking where we all were and what was going on then. So then you're driving having never driven a cement truck before.
Nope.
Concrete truck, pardon me. Then you're dealing with
live load, fluid load, driving out to Kelowna with people that are a lot. And then there was also, the other side of that strike is that there was people there that didn't want us driving concrete into Kelowna too.
For sure.
So there was animosity and there was optimism and there was excitement, but there was,
So how did you deal with that? Were you kind of like, great, let's take it by the horns and get after
it? I'm just delivering. You want it here? Sure, that's fine. I'll just drop it off wherever, whoever's paying for it.
How were the first couple of days? Like I know a good driver.
I felt like I was all over the place. I mean, I remember going over to like the other side in the Mission, and then on the way back heading up to Glen Rosa, and just being all over that, like wondering how much concrete was even in the truck. Probably not even really aware at the time, right? I don't know. It's full. What is that? I don't know.
So what is when you like how long could you have concrete in the truck? As long as it's spinning, how long can it actually not start to cause problems?
Well, shelf life is dependent on the weather, temperature in the drum, specific mixes, how strong mix is. The stronger the mix, the more cement, the more volatile. So did you slow it down? Did you put it to sleep with any chemicals or not? So I think I would say, guessing he was probably putting like 2 hours of delay in the concrete and sent it up to Kelowna, and hopefully that's enough.
Yeah. So 2 hours of delay so
it'll give you like 2 hours theoretically.
Yep.
Strictly theoretically, at 2 hours, you would now have an hour of working time that you would get if you didn't have the delay.
Okay.
But that 2 hour window is hour and a half to 2.5
Pretty
hours.
vague.
And it's dependent on, it's like a cake mix.
Sure.
Did you have too much water in there when you added the chemical? Then that dilutes the, right?
We'll get into this a little bit more in a minute, but just so those of you watching and listening who maybe don't understand how concrete can be manipulated, there are chemicals that can be added to a load in a truck or during the mixing time that will delay the time that it sets or speed it up. So you could typically even have some of that chemical on your truck.
Always.
So if you have a situation, there's a car accident, they're stuck on the highway, they can dump the solution into the mix and then it won't set. It won't turn rock hard in their mixer. So I'm just thinking of you as a super green guy showing up on sites, having to like fill wheelbarrows and fill pump trucks and learning the equipment and like making a mess.
Even less pumps then. Like that's not that long ago, but it was still in the Okanagan before the larger corporations came in and bought the ready mix. It was still a wheelbarrow show. There wasn't that many pumps around. It was unheard of to really always have a pump, right?
Yeah.
So
you overflowed some wheelbarrows?
Very likely tipped them over on somebody and then tried to pick it up myself or whatever. Yeah. The biggest fear would be dumping it on the road, really, when you're sitting, or is the drum going the right way? That's always the biggest thing, right? Because in the mirror, it's the opposite direction of what it is when you look over your shoulder, right? Funny. So I know there was stories of guys dumping. I specifically remember concrete being dumped on the road at the lineup of the construction on the way up to Kelowna, and then getting hearing about a phone call, somebody's driving in behind the truck, right? Because if it's wet and you do this and you're not smooth on the clutch and your drum's not moving, you for sure will probably spill out the back.
It's great. These things I've never really given any
never pull
consideration
up,
to.
Don't pull up too close behind a concrete truck if it's got concrete in it.
Yeah. So you corrected Luke when he said you're driving the cement truck and you said concrete. Why concrete truck? Why not? What's the difference?
Oh, that's just kind of something that I do because my kids I fostered it into my kids and my wife. But cement truck is the bulker, the powder is the cement. So cement is a constituent that goes in to making concrete. So it's like calling concrete sand or rock in a sense.
So cement is a product that you add to
cement,
make concrete.
Fly ash, sand, rock.
It'd be like calling a cake flour.
Exactly. Yeah. Same thing.
That's funny because
as soon as I said I'm getting in trouble, and
my kids are even since they were a bit little. It's concrete truck. They would tell people they hear the word cement truck. It's not a cement truck. It's a concrete truck.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's one of the additives.
Yeah.
Okay. So I noticed you have all your fingers. You didn't shear any of them off, putting chutes on your truck.
No, try to stay out of those pinch points, eh?
Because every time that we had deliveries and I'm watching the chutes going on, and they're always, you're trying to throw them on there hard to knock any crap off too.
They were the steel ones too, so we've eliminated, I think, all the steel ones now at our place, and they're all just aluminum chutes. So the difference in that is unbelievable. But it took a long time to get there for sure for that. Steel, they're super heavy, right? Yeah. They do break off. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the chutes we're talking about, like you see a truck and typically there's like the one primary pivoting chute at the top. And then there's all these, what are they, 4 feet, 40 inches?
It's just over 3 feet actually, yeah. So
so close to 40 inches. And there's 3 foot sections and they've got hooks that go into loops and you drop them in and drop them and they snap down and the joint is tight. And when they drop them in, there's this like opening that slams shut and steel over steel. And if anything is in there, it's
Yeah,
toast.
they're heavy. I mean, especially loaded, like delivering, unloading at a job site. I mean, you put all the chutes on and you have this ram. It's 12 feet out there.
Yeah.
Just swing it over. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Just swing it over. The whole thing's twisting, right? Yeah. I know that it happens where the concrete gets discharged too fast with that many chutes on. And I know of situations where they actually tear the chutes right off.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Like leaving the chute scraper in the chute and then or not, and just ripping the ears right off the chutes coming out so fast.
I bet.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
3 chutes maximum. You can't go legally. You're not allowed to put more than that on there.
Oh,
we
really?
We get asked lots.
I think I've done.
Or you can make your own chute.
Yeah.
But we can't put more chutes.
Yeah.
On. Yeah. You can make a wood trough, no problem.
Yep.
But more weight, you just can't. You think about how much weight's on the outside end of
huge.
that hydraulic
Yeah,
ram
no
there.
kidding.
It's like,
Concrete's heavy.
Yeah, we've made some shoots though for sure over the years.
Yeah. We make less chutes now because now the pumps are out everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay, so you went from driving just like
so
straight in, hair straight back.
Yeah, I started August 11th, the day after the birthday there, and October 1st they were bought out by a large corporation from Alberta.
Okay.
And took over, and then there was opportunity right away, right? So for me, it was just I lucked out. Really, I wasn't really looking for a place to land. I was done fire school. I was kind of biding my time to see if I would get in here in Penticton. And then opportunity kind of came rolling along. They had a concrete pump truck. So again, not really any experience other than equipment and comfortability and confidence. And would you like to run this? Sure.
You ran the pump?
Yeah. So then I pumped
way.
concrete for like a year, maybe a year steady. And then before that year was up, or maybe a little, in that area, I was asked if I wanted to do the sales because they wanted, they wanted more production and wanted more sales here.
So how long were you driving trucks before you started operating the pump?
Oh, like a few months, probably.
So pretty quick transition.
Yeah, right away.
And had you had any experience running cranes or overhead stuff before too?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we weren't ticketing then either, right? So ticketing cranes. It was like, are you comfortable with this? Yeah, sure. All right. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're all right. Let's go.
Yeah. And it was all why you didn't have any remote controllers. It was all probably hardwired controllers.
Yeah, that one
right?
had an umbilical cord, I think.
Yeah.
But it was like it wasn't connected though anyway. So
But is it kind of like, so when you go back there, and so I'm just thinking of you being, concrete driver, and then now to doing the pump truck, to go to sales from that, like this is such a huge difference. Like not only did you do that fast, what's it like being like a guy who's just there, construction dude, pouring concrete to, oh, now I am actually into sales? What is that transition like?
Yeah, the equipment was more comfortable for me for sure to operate equipment and to drive. But I mean, no matter how brief that snapshot was, that certainly set the stage for me to be able to do the job I was doing better and having a better understanding, right? So for me, with anything, I really like to try to understand what it is. I'm all right with having differences of opinion, but I want to understand why you have a different opinion. I want to understand how that happened, and I want to fix it. I always want to fix it. So when I moved into the sales, they kind of approached and said, would you do this? And it was a natural option for them because I was the youngest guy there. I was from Penticton, and the rest of the drivers most of them were all older than me or just weren't interested in that. Right. So they knew I knew a lot of people in town. I knew finishers, I knew guys that were friends of mine. So that transition was like, oh yeah, this sounds good. It's another challenge and a little more, more to do, more to represent, more on my shoulders. I like that idea. But the learning it's huge, right? So you're now I'm going out, my people I know that I haven't been in the business that long, and I'm going out to explain to them why something's not doing this thing, what it's supposed to. And, or the reality is I'm going out there to tell them that they didn't do it right. Right. But who am I to tell them that they didn't do it right? I'm not, no, I'm well aware where my lanes are. Yeah. So, you got to be pretty careful. You tiptoe out there and say to you, Luke, you're like, actually, Luke, you didn't do that right. Like, well, sorry, what did you say to me? Yeah. So why is that? Oh, I've been doing it like this for, the hardest thing to tell somebody. Well, one of the hardest things is that, I know you've been doing it for 10 years. Unfortunately, you've been doing it wrong.
For 10 years.
And just no one's told you. And you've been lucky all this time.
Yeah.
But this
so
is
like,
the
give
reality.
me an example. Like I'm curious, what's an example of
like
that?
Putting water on the concrete when they're finishing it.
Okay.
You know, finishing up, putting the hose on the surface because it's drying up and they want more cream.
Yeah.
You know, blessing the water, they call it, blessing the concrete, they call it, right? Common practice. You've all seen it. If you've been near a job site, you have good concrete, you've seen it. But that's jeopardizing the integrity of the surface of the concrete. So again, like a cake mix, you've added more water to the cake mix. Now you've diluted it. The strength is not going to be there. The durability is not going to be there. It's not going to last. So often what happens is in that finishing process, say the final time they're going to power trowel, now the surface starts to delaminate and come apart. And then, you know, get a call and say, well, your concrete's, you know, it's always the concrete.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it for sure is the concrete, but often it's not.
Usually
the
not.
concrete. I mean, the idea,
okay.
generally, we don't change things from day to day. I mean, here we don't. That place, we would tinker all the time. You know, 5 cents is a big deal. If you can save it here, then that's bottom line. We don't operate that way currently anymore. But you know, we don't change every day, so it's very common to get, man, I don't know what you guys did today, but it is awesome.
Yeah,
that concrete. Oh, great. That's awesome. Yeah. You know, well, there's a bit of low cloud, a bit of humidity. The wind is not blowing. The temperature's right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah. That's very common. I don't know what you did. I don't know what you did.
Well, I remember the
same thing I did yesterday. So,
we talked about it on site about being like, this is perfect. It's so nice. But again, you know, it's a nice cloudy, humid day. All of a sudden the sun breaks through and you're in panic mode.
Now you're running.
Yeah.
The wind picked up.
You're freaking out. And so as a salesman, so this is, I know I'm getting stuck on the sales part, but like, how do you sell concrete? Like where are you going? It's not like you're going to all these houses being like, hey, you want us to pour your concrete? Like what's the sales part of that?
You're just putting yourself out there. And you know, in a town like that, I'm coming to see Luke and I'm saying, how's it going? Maybe I'm giving you some swag. I'm asking if I can help you out. You know, is there anything we can do over and above? Can I, you know, at the end of the day, you could buy your concrete from whoever.
Yeah.
Right. We're all following generally the same specs. We all more or less giving you the same, but what can I do extra?
Okay, sure.
What can I do that I'm going to be able to help you out? And if there's a problem, how can I be better than my competitors?
Yeah.
Right. That's the only thing I could offer. Right. So, and again, when I was thrown into the sales, it was like a crash course. Okay, well, you better figure out and learn what concrete's doing out there.
And on average, how many people are you competing against in an area like Penticton?
There's only 2 suppliers and us.
Okay.
In Summerland here. Yeah. And then, I mean, south, it gets super diluted. Right. So Oliver, used to be 2 when I was down there. There's 2 in Asuyas. So it gets really saturated that way.
Gotcha.
I mean, tradespeople too, they're quite opinionated. Loyalty is a big deal.
Yep.
You know, consistency and communication are paramount. So if you can develop relationships with builders and you become their go-to guy and you foster a relationship with good drivers, good pump truck operator, and you got this good system, like that's like, I've got them for ages now. Like this is a good machine.
And that was the biggest hurdle for us. The company I worked for before they were bought was a small literally mom and pop were in there when I applied. And we were competing against another larger mom and pop. And the loyalty there was unbreakable.
Yeah.
Like 20 plus years, guys, they didn't even want you to come over and say,
well,
like,
it's funny because
it didn't matter if you were, you know, like if you could be, the price didn't really even matter. It didn't matter. They weren't even interested in knowing what your price was.
Well, that's who I worked with.
Yeah.
So we're not going to mention names, but that company he's referring to is the only one that I used, the builders I used, that was the place.
Yeah.
And then there was a company you worked for. They're like, oh, then there's those guys.
Yeah. And plus we were the out of town too, right?
Yeah.
And it was from Alberta, and, you know, and then that point too, still it was like, oh, BC, you know, Alberta. We don't want to do that.
Because then I got into a big subdivision and new guys in town from elsewhere who were like, we want best price. And all of a sudden there was this shift to the company that you were working for. I'm like, oh, I guess we're going to be working with this other company now I haven't worked with, even though they're around us all the time. We're pouring dozens of foundations a year. We switched over, and I was like, and that's when you and I started working together. And I'm like, oh, this is a smoothly run operation. This is really, really handy. And you guys had your own pump truck.
Yep.
And that was huge because typically you're like trying to order concrete and schedule a pump truck and coordinate everything, which is a royal pain in the neck.
Yeah.
And for you guys, one-stop shop for forms, for supply, for pump truck.
Yeah.
And it was just smooth and worked fantastic. So through that whole development, it was just like, it worked great. Great communication and consistency. was fantastic. So then when I was doing projects in Summerland here, private ones outside that development, then I was actually working with the previous owner of SRM, and we did stuff on my own home and other builds around here. But they were a small little hometown operation. And, what came with that was smaller trucks, less organization, but you're kind of supporting the local small town company.
Yeah.
So what was your transition from then, working for that big company in Penticton and then buying this one and taking this one over?
Yeah. So my business partner, he was actually the manager for the Okanagan for that company at the time as well. I'd hired, so he and I always been connected and then stayed in touch. And then I actually hired him in Penticton.
Okay.
And he worked there for a bit, and then he took an opportunity to look after Salmon Arm, which was acquired by that company. And then which morphed into a Vernon location, which then ended up bringing him back to, and he was from Summerland. So he was driving to Salmon Arm every day. So then he ended up getting the Okanagan job. So he was actually my boss then. And so then him and I, that life is for lots of people. It's not for everyone. So eventually you can get kicked in the back and feel like you're just not getting treated or respected the way you think you should be. And a lot of time that would happen. And then him and I would gripe about it and say, we should just do this. We should just do this. We should just do this. Yeah, we should do this for a day or two. We should find some property, or we should just do this. And then, back to work. Yeah. And then, another month or two down the road, or 6 months. And it's like, again, what is that for? I'm busting myself down here.
Yeah.
We were doing very well for that company. We were making them a lot of money. We had the hospital project down here.
Right.
Wow.
We were outperforming expectations by a mile. And then you'd still get a kick in the back because something wasn't going right in another province and it would impact you financially, so it did when that final straw came again, and it was like, you know what, that's enough. That's it. I'm not doing this. This is making me unhappy.
Yeah.
And to be honest too, in my position there, I got to the point where it wasn't challenging as much anymore. Like I found myself all of a sudden, and you could get complacent where I could, wait a minute, I could not be here right now. And this thing just keeps running. Okay, well, I guess I don't have to be here right now. Do I need to be here right now? What am I doing? And it just kind of, I feel like I lost the drive a bit too.
A bit disposable almost.
Yeah, it just got too easy where I'd start to get complacent almost, in retrospect and at the time, I'm so glad I didn't just carry on and just stay in lane and marching along, because I needed more. I need something else.
So then you decided to kind of go off on your own, and it's been a cakewalk. It's been
easy peasy. So we left that place. We gave a month's notice to help properly exit out, and being aware that we weren't leaving the valley and going to do something in another industry. You had to be aware who your competitors are. And
did they know that you were?
We gave them lots of opportunity to not let it happen, and in the end, it did. And so we respectfully gave a month's notice to try and get proper placement of people in there before we left, because they didn't know what we were going to do, but we knew. So we didn't want somebody else. We knew we were going to be competing against them.
Yeah.
Right. So we had to be careful. We don't want to get squashed like a bug, because that's definitely happens for little operations in this industry. So we left there May 4th in 2018, and May 7th we were over here getting dirty. So 3 trucks to start, and 5-6 years later now, I guess, 8 trucks and plants and property.
It was interesting seeing the evolution of that plant, because I think the original, the guy that I feel is the original was Gertie, the local guy here.
Right, yep.
Did he build the plant originally?
I think it actually was with the Gibbs family.
Okay. Because then, Gerd did it, and then Gerd became the form guy. And
I understand Gerd got it from Gibbs.
Okay.
Right, who was Gibbs Ready Mix. Because Gibbs Ready Mix was also in Penticton. And
oh, really?
They have a long history.
I don't think Gerd has changed at all for 20 years. Like from guy. when he first was dropping forms out for us and everything like that, like I still see him and I'm like, he's always going to be exactly that guy. Doesn't get older. He just
drives the same truck.
Yeah.
Working hard.
And just stressed out of his mind all the time.
Hard.
Yeah. Oh, he works his butt off, and like, again, I'd go to pick up forms up when he had the forms up in the old industrial thing there.
Yeah.
And it was always a smoke out of his mouth. His dog's sitting there, and they're just going full tilt. But super nice guy, always like, yeah, we'll get it, and phone him, Gert, I'm in short forms. And all of a sudden he's just there in the truck by himself, unloading like.
And manual everything. No equipment.
Manuel,
flatbed, truck.
Just him and Manuel working, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then his dog, Tucker.
And he was the only form show in town. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when we bought, we knew we needed a form business. We needed to have that on because you need to be able to control yourself. Plus, generally speaking, you don't put your concrete in someone else's forms and vice versa. There's, without some sort of a phone call and saying, hey, this guy's really on me here. Can we do this? You all right with it, right? Okay. Again, you don't want to get one of these from the big guys, especially us. So not having your forms just puts you in a tough spot right away. So there was a form yard across the street behind the bottle depot there that was being operated. It was operated is a bit of a loose word, but it was kind of a pile of forms this size of this room here, this portion here. And it was about 8-10 feet high. And here you go, you know, oh, okay. You want to sell? Yeah. So we ended up buying that. And then Darcy and I basically worked in the form yard for like 2 years straight, producing panels, processing panels, delivering panels. Yeah. And growing the business until we were, trying to grow the business. And that's just another facet, which again, we had to you couldn't, but you had to step away from the concrete to get the forms to a point. Yeah. I can't just say I'm renting forms, but I only have 2 corners of every size, right. So, you can, but for sure, you're going to ask me for more of that one corners that I only have 1 or 2 of as soon as you order.
All the time.
And form business is every time without fail. If you get a big order for whatever size someone else will call, and probably one more after that within the 24 hours and ask for the exact same size of forms to rent. Yep. And you can look on the wall and have every other size that you have sitting there and full. Yep. And people will always ask for the same size within 24 hours. And you think, oh man, 300 of those. Okay. Yeah, we got them. And then, 100, what? Which size? Oh, you're kidding me again. Oh my gosh. So yeah, having to make them scramble or buy more plywood, which, that was 10 foot, 8 foot, and 12 foot. I mean, like $17,000 for a lift of 12-foot plywood. Yeah. About 3 years ago. Yeah.
And then trying to make them in a hurry and not do a shitty job too, because if they don't go together nicely.
Oh yeah.
That sucks for us on the other
end.
So
you guys make them? Is that so do you get them in a 4x8?
4x 12 or 4x8, 4x10. Yeah.
Okay. And then, and they're all already papered and everything, but they don't have any holes in them.
Yeah, that's right. Then we have to put them on the board, router them all out. Same with the corners, build all the corners.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a huge job. I know there was times where we're in that situation, we need stuff. Like we just sent out all those forms. Let me go to my seconds pile. We'll try and find, how nice do they need to be?
Yeah, well, scrap too, right? That's one of the biggest things too, is when it's busy. Like, do go to a 12-foot form ply panel. That is a big piece of wood. Like a corner panel is huge and heavy.
Jeez, I know.
Right? So, and I mean, you're looking at $200 for one sheet, 12x2 form panel. Maybe routed, $200 of value. That's what that's looking like on the wall, one panel.
What about a corner with all the hardware?
Oh, you're 14. You're like $400 for a corner.
Yeah. And what is a like? We did a whole bunch of 12-foot foundations, and the 12-foot outside corners, and packing those suckers around. What do they weigh?
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. They're for a lot of people, they're a 2-person carry, and if you do it by yourself, you're grunting. They're heavy.
But the form side of it is trying to return, right? So you could send me back a lift of 10-foot panels. You're all done. We go pick them up, and now we got to get them clean, and there'll be a customer waiting for them, right? So that turnaround is that's the demand on it. You're scraping and cleaning and oiling and trying to get the holes punched and get all the screws and nails out, right?
Yeah.
So
and dealing with the nice new panels you've got that someone's cut.
Yeah,
that was oh man, that was something I remember.
Whaler.
Yeah, Whaler all being chopped down. And then
shiny shorts, that's what we call them. We hate to see shiny shorts when you go to pick up Whaler and you see short little shiny ones, that was just brand new.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Or I can remember going in a foundation, Darcy and I are picking up forms, and we'd always walk around. We'd get any little piece of rebar if the guys let us, and then use it for our big blocks right at the plant. So we wander around to make sure we got everything, and there's a piece of Whaler in that foundation, and hop over the wall and then be like, oh my gosh, there's short pieces everywhere that are inside, right? And you're not supposed to see those, you hear from over on the wall, right? Oh. So
it's funny, I don't ever remember cutting Whaler bark.
No,
Gerd always,
bless you.
Gerd always had
Well, I always asked for them. When I was ordering forms, I'm like, I want all the fillers, this many fillers. I want whaler bar. And it was made clear to me right away, like, please never cut whaler bar. We'll bring you more if you need it.
$11 for 8 feet.
Yeah. And then I also, like with Gerd all the early years, because I was so picky, he had straight whaler bar and premium panels set aside for me.
Not pre-bent.
Set aside for me, because I'd be like, Gerd, I got another 20 bars here, which I need, but they're all so bloody bent. The walls look like garbage. I can't get them in. He's like, okay, we'll have Luke's whaler bar.
Yeah. So we had a lift of whaler on site one time, was brand new, and somebody drove over it on the job site, and they drove over on the edge, so it was bent on its edge, not on that. You couldn't straighten it.
Yeah.
So we still got those panels. And you look at them in the whaler box, they're like this, sitting in there like, oh.
So what do you do with them?
Cut them all.
Cut them up. I mean, the problem with the whaler side of things for rental is in our business, which is.
Let me pause you for a second. So for context, for people watching and listening, what we're talking about in regards to the style of formwork is called strip easy. And they are 2 foot wide panels with it's a 1 inch routed hole.
Yep.
Right. So there's rows of holes, and the whaler bar is like 7/8 by 1/4 inch thick flat steel bar. They're 8 feet long. So you put flat metal ties through the holes and a whaler bar through the back. So there's other industrial types of formwork where there's brick brackets and cones and all that stuff. This is called strip easy, is the form that we're talking about, which is most common here. Anyway, so all that whaler bar being cut and dealt with.
Well, that's the problem is in our industry, interestingly enough, which our industry is not shy on making charges and putting on extra this and that, but whaler bar is not something we actually capture which is a travesty, but we try to capture it, but the damaged whaler, it's a terrible circle. Like you can't, you know. And we look towards something where we can input a percentage on your form order that you pay a portion of that gets your whaler to try and capture but we never run out of short whaler, and that's the worst part is it's always getting cut because it's always more of it. You don't never need more short, you always need more long. So where's it going?
Well, it's interesting too, because from your standpoint, like the different builders and form guys around, there's going to be ones that are great and guys that are just the worst. So like then trying to like capture things like, well, I'm going to be robbing from the guys who are doing a good job, and the guys who are cutting my stuff all up aren't paying nearly enough. Yeah,
like that's right.
The tough
thing. And often it's the guys, my framer is going to he's going to pick everything up. Okay. And you bill me though. Okay. She'll bill you. Okay. And the framer's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. You're like, oh, what's this damaged forms? Well, your framer cut them all. Well, why did, so that's the dispute. Or the framer says, yeah, I cut these, just bill me for a couple extra forms. Yeah. I don't want the guy paying the bill to know that I did that. Right. Yeah. So it's the turnaround on the whaler, the forms, it's tough. Yep. That's why we have the new machine across the street that's going to be in production here and next week.
What is it? Yeah.
It's a form cleaning machine. It's automated. So
that's cool.
For instance, when we had it operating in town in its conceptual, and when we were working out kinks, my guy did 388 10-foot panels in 3 hours cleaned.
Holy cow!
So that doesn't do corners or T panels, but that's the difference of me buying or us buying another lift of plywood.
Totally. So you're saying this? So a form comes back. It's got.
So the holes would be full. It'd have some nails or whatever, and it needs to be scraped to get the excess concrete off, and it needs to be oiled and ready to go back out again. So typically that'd be load it all up, bring it back in, you set it up on the way we were doing it, and you're going to punch the holes out on sawhorses with a bar and quick. Then you're going to scrape it. If there's any screws or nails, pull them out, and then you're going to oil it, put it back in the pile, and
this machine does all that.
Yeah, so the machine has a couple of scissor tables at either end that are on laser levels. And then, so it's kind of like the old Bottle Depot rollers inside. You pull your panel in, there's a airline with a chisel on hanging from the roof. You hit the holes, push it in the machine, and it's brushes. And the brushes all clean off the panel. And as it comes through, proceeds through that machine, it hits the oiler, the oil bar drops down on there, and then there's a squeegee beyond that, and then that squeegees the excess oil off, which we recapture in the bottom, put it back up, and it comes out on the other side onto the other scissor table, which is laser leveled as well. So yeah, no corners and no T-panels, but again...
So you manually have to still pull the nails and screws.
Yeah.
And then you've got an air chisel that punches the holes out, so you're
like
handling
bang,
that.
Bang, bang, bang as it's coming by.
That's slick.
Yeah. So I mean, literally will save a lot of things. Oil usage would be way down. Panels before, we've definitely had the situation where the customer wants more 10-foot panels, 12, 8-foot, whatever it is, and we don't have enough. And we know, hey, so he wants them on Thursday. We're picking that order up Thursday afternoon. We're going to be a day late. Like, what are we going to do here? We're going to be we better just get another lift of plywood. So another, $13,000, or if it's 8 foot, it's a little less, right? So we're buying that. Now I could pick up the panels this morning and I can have them out to you in the afternoon because I can put them through that fast.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's the corners you need anyways to get started, as you know, but at least I can get you going. I could for sure run those things through quick.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's a game changer for us.
Yeah. I remember when we would have dirty forms, what was the tool we used all the time to clean them?
Well, we've used the edge of our hammer and our nail puller.
Yeah, or a square.
And
you ever have a square? You're just sitting there just
knocking the tie holes out. That was always frustrating. Guys in a panic. We need more forms. We're short. Okay, yeah, I just pulled another job. And they bring them straight to us from the other job.
Down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, oh, great. Now we got to scrape them and clean them. And then they're, your spaces are growing and then you're having to cut panels to make them fit. It's just
or guys that sit there, instead of cutting with a skill saw, they would just take like a 1-inch drill and then you have like a hole this big, a 1-inch hole because they just drilled through all your ties there. And then you're trying to put it in there all floppy. You can't get your whaler bar because it's just like,
it's a mess. Okay. So the original plant, which is still across the street, you guys have for the last, is it over a year, have been building a new plant? Has it been that long?
It's been 2 years.
2 years.
I would have said 2 years because I remember as soon as you guys took over, it was obvious that you guys were doing something. Like all the concrete blocks that you're
driving
bringing
in circles.
Yeah.
So why build a new plant right next door to the old one?
Many reasons. But probably one of the biggest would be to be able to control our own destiny as a business. So the capacity on that old plant, essentially, when you drive by that plant and 5 days a week, you probably see a bulker parked on the hill, which is blocking one of two access points to the main
So bulker,
area.
this is a truck.
Cement truck.
Yeah.
Cement truck.
An actual cement truck.
Actual cement truck,
okay.
yeah. Or a fly ash truck. They look similar.
Yeah.
Both with dry product. So they're unloading, blowing into the silos for storage. Now, they're carrying enough that we can just hold that in that 40-ton silo. So give or take, you got to allow for what's in there. The powder bulk supply is a bit, within a couple thousand kgs for sure, right? By the time it settles. So we get that material in and we got enough for a day and a bit. The difficulty comes when you factor in that ordering of concrete might not be accurate. So we know roughly almost, we know we're going to allocate all that cement to somewhere. But it's based on the information. It's like anything else. Information in is telling me that I got this much concrete going out before 10 o'clock. I know I need a load of powder at this point. So it's based on thinking that they're going to be right. And those guys know how much they need. So you get the powder in. Now, this is a question of, it comes from rail cars and the other side in Orville. So if the rail cars don't show up, and the powder or something's happened, which the railroad, if anyone's knows about the railroad, it's very unpredictable. So if the cars or something happened there, like one time the cars came up and the lids weren't closed on the powder on the cars. So then, so they're gone. Driving down. Well, if it gets any moisture in it,
it's toast.
That's it. So you're trying to get that solved. So they drive to Seattle to get the powder directly. Well, then they end up being they're on American short loads. So it's actually less volume in the trucks because they can haul on the American side less. They also run into driving hours and houring out. So on a Monday, if you want concrete or powder on Thursday, if they're hauling out of the States, they can't tell you whether they can bring it on Thursday because they don't know whether their drivers will be parked on the side of the road having his nap because he needs to get his logbook straightened out or not. And you don't actually know how much is going to be coming because it could be American short load. So it could be like way less than 3,000. You never know. So it gets here. It's on the side of the hill. We think we know what we're going to have. We think we know what the customers need to order. But then you have some guys who under order or over order. And by the end of the day, we're unable to take those smaller orders, or we're unable to say to somebody, at 1 o'clock, we'll be good to go with your 18 meters or your footings, because we're not sure how much we're really going to get. Yeah. We're not sure what everyone's going to use in the morning. And so this ability with the new plant gives us 3 loads of powder in the silo, as opposed to barely one. It's 120 ton. This is 40 ton, the one we have currently.
It's not dissimilar to you and just having the stock of leather, right? Because we get the leather shipped, it's it's done in or it's from the States, then to Mexico, then up here.
It
then
does go to Mexico, no, but it travels around, and sometimes it's on rail cars, and there's delivery issues.
Rail cars, you're at the mercy of the rail car.
And then they say, oh yeah, it'll be here at this time. Well, and then we've got all these orders. All of a sudden, there's no stuff left there, and then Luke's like, and then you have a bunch of employees that are like, well, what are we supposed to
for?
build?
And the load shows up, and it's not right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And so now, similarly, we got the big space, and Luke is always trying to make sure that there's pallets left over in case someone's like, we don't have anything for you. We can just keep going.
For me, it's over like periods of weeks. You're talking like days
and a day.
Like you got to be right on top of it all the time.
In the space of 8 hours.
Jeez.
Like that's
and then so we're trying to organize tomorrow. That's today. What about tomorrow, right? And the day after, because we've already got guys, we've already got people trying to book, right? But the problem is they'll also get people that are booking and they don't know what they need. They just know they need it. So I need concrete on Thursday and I need it over here. How much you need? A couple trucks. Well, is that 20 meters or is it 12? Like that makes a big difference when you're dialing it back and into the 40 ton of cement range. You don't have that wiggle room to do, or, so in the morning, you have lots of customers in the morning, there's concrete coming back because they've ordered, and you're thinking, man, we could have done a job or two in the afternoon. We could have given that guy a yes instead of I don't know, and now he's getting it from somewhere else because we couldn't guarantee we could supply, right? So being able to hold that in our hands is a huge difference. The plant right now is super inefficient. We're taking like 35 minutes to load a 10-meter truck because it's 8-meter hopper is the max we can load. So every constituent is physically recorded and added into that hopper with every concrete truck we send out right currently. So handwritten, the constituents, tracking down what the targets are, what the actual was, recording it all. We're handwriting the tickets. We're handwriting a piece of paper with a scale slip to give to the guy in the loader who's manually loading and watching the scale and making sure he's not over. So it's arduous right now. I think when the wind blew right, we did like 40 meters an hour out of this plant was the best we could do. That new plant's rated to do like 130. So and
it's all automated.
We can load a truck in like 3 minutes.
Man.
Yeah, too fast, really.
As of this week,
you
just got it operational?
Yeah, we're operating out of there. It'll be tinkering for a few months for sure. But yeah, I mean...
what is this? No, there's different types of plants? Like
what dry batch. This is a dry batch plant. So there's a wet batch plant in downtown Kelowna that the local operator has there, as well as dry batch. But it's essentially like, you're hand mixing... you rent a hand mixer, picture that just on a giant scale. So it's up on the plant mixing and then it dumps it into the truck wet, ready to go already.
Right.
Essentially.
So, because right now what happens is all the raw elements are dumped into the truck and it mixes in the truck.
Yeah, that's right. That's all it is.
What's the benefit? Is it
it's supposed to be faster and more consistent, but then the situations I'm not familiar with the wet batch as much, although I know that the problem can be that in the winter you're not running or you have to be completely hoarded in because you can't run it. It's open to the elements, right? So,
gotcha.
But speed, because there's no messing around. Once it's in the truck, away you go. Yeah. With the dry batch, you're monkeying, you're adding water. You could be chasing your slumps around. You could be chasing some things around. You're also up to as you would know, when the truck shows up to site, and every driver has his own perception of what a 4-inch or 100 mil slump is, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
The consistency, that's the one thing we have to now crash course in with our guys is the same guy who's been batching the load has been slumping the trucks up for 6 years over there. That's his job. Nobody, when we first purchased, the drivers didn't even really, I don't think they even necessarily had to go back and look and see what they had. The guy said, you're good to go and head out of here. So that's
Curtis is one of your drivers, correct?
Yeah. Long serving
Curtis
employee
is
over there.
Freaking just love that guy. I mean, again, he's ever since like I first did our first house to me doing my own things. He's just like super pumped, such a good attitude. He was out of all the concrete drivers, he was the first one to grab a trowel, help me finish things, get on a shovel, and just like pumped. And we're musicians, and he played bass and with some like legit
he's still
bands.
rocking for sure now. Yeah,
like just what a gem.
He's a beauty. Yeah, he is for sure. Yeah,
that's great.
And that's the kind of the thing when we bought here was coming from that corporate, role up in that business, and it was such a, you know, the expectations. We didn't want to be a mom and pop. We felt like we bought in this area here. We came from up here. We wanted to kind of find a happy place in the middle, right, where people still, this is still a mom and pop operation out here. They know who they're talking to. They can put a face to it, but they get what they want, and it's a better quality, right? So one thing that's been key for us is the plant had good concrete before we bought. They were well known to do that. They just had a problem with supply, right? So we haven't changed. We never changed a thing there, and there's a reason for it. And to the detriment of ourselves, honestly, because we're actually paying higher costs for the materials we're getting, as opposed to our competitors, who I know have changed their ways and you know, again, 5 cents. But for us, our customer base, our product is key for us. So we're not willing to mess around with that. If it costs us more money to make it and we can't necessarily pass that on, then we have to separate ourselves from the others, right? So
that's awesome. Okay, that's a great kind of history of new plant in the works and kind of where you've come from in your background. So let's go through a few kind of terms and just kind of catch people up if they're unaware. A lot of this whole series that I wanted to do was to kind of pull back the curtain. Like, here's what happens on the other side of the phone. Here's what happens actually at the plant, you know, versus just what you're handling by hand. Like, are you the person to actually, are you aware of the MPA of the concrete that you're even dealing with? Do you aware of, like, if there's delay in it? Or are you just the hands-on guy troweling it out? You know, so here's a bit of a description of some of that stuff. And a lot of it, you've been to school and you've gone through your apprenticeship, you're aware of the chemical reaction, how the concrete's put together and what its function is. But just by way of definition, what are the elements involved and how do they function? Just in a really, really basic manner.
Yeah, I mean, water, rock, and sand and cement. You know, that's it. The Romans didn't, you know, they didn't keep their secrets. It's it hasn't changed a lot. I mean, I've got books that are, you know, tell you how to and what's what in the ready mix, and its pictures are from the 60s, right? And it's nothing. It has still the same thing. I mean, you get some, you know, salespeople come around with the new best thing, but it's usually not what it's. You end up reverting back to what it is. You know, I would say there's been a couple of products that would for us have changed in the industry, and some of the applications or things that we could offer, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of there's a lot of hocus pocus out there. But
so water, sand, gravel, and cement. And the cement is
rock and sand,
and you got fly ash, like the elements of that powder, which is what you'd buy from the hardware store if you buy a bag of it. Fly ash, and what other stuff is in there? So
fly ash is a supplementary cementing material. So a byproduct of coal. It originally was probably really in the industry when I started it was like the boogeyman, you know, we don't want that in there. It's just a cheap filler. But again, it's a misconception or not educated on what it's actually doing. So for instance, under a microscope, if you looked at fly ash and cement looks like a snowflake. It's really jagged and sharp, you know, so not a lot of smoothness on it at all. Fly ash looks like ball bearings almost. So if you took a couple of pails and you dumped a pail of cement out on fly ash, the cement would just hit the ground and stop. The fly ash would flow out because it rolls. So the benefit of that would be like doing high flow mixes, wet mixes, right? It helps the rock it helps to flow in. It fills in those voids. Because of it being a finer grind and it being round, you don't get the bug holing that you get with a straight cement mix because it'll fill itself in. So when we do really architectural mixes, it's always like a really high fly ash.
So does it kind of function like a plasticizer in a sense?
Not in that you need everything to work together. But what the fly ash is doing is it's also cooling that. It's so cement and concrete is hot, right? When you know when it gets warm. Fly ash actually helps to slow that down a bit.
Okay.
So if you have a high fly ash mix, you actually take longer to get to your strengths.
But it gets stronger.
Yeah, and forever. It'll always be good.
Is it less vibration too for fly ash?
No,
because it
not necessarily. It depends on the slump of your mix and what you're doing, right? So vibration is a kind of a different beast in that regard. But if comparing non-fly ash mix to a fly ash mix for walls, you know, a really good vibrator is going to change the game for you anyways, right? So, but with the two different mixes, say on a raft slab so a really thick, like 4-foot raft slab on a big commercial building, you want to have a really high fly ash mix, because otherwise you can easily fry bacon on top of that slab in the afternoon. It'll generate that much heat. And then what happens is the thermal cracking will appear, right? So if you get a lot of scattered cracking on a thick piece of concrete, it's because it got too hot and opened up, and the concrete's looking for some moisture, saying, hey, we're too hot down here.
Yeah.
The fly ash will slow that down, so it takes a longer period, which reduces the cracking because it doesn't ever get as hot.
Yeah. So then different types of concrete in regards to just like the different mixes, like the one that I'm familiar with, we have our standard 25 MPa kind of footing mix. Sometimes our structural walls, we got 32 MPa, which, and that just basically means that the ratios of the things mixed into the concrete are
More
modified.
cement.
More cement.
MPA stands for?
That's going to be indicate your compressive strength. So CSA states that you have to have that specific compressive strength in 28 days. That's the target, 28 days. So again, if you have a high fly ash mix, you can go 56 days. You go 90 days on it if you've got that high fly ash mix. So it'll take that much longer to get to your strength over.
But the higher the MPa, the more compressive strength that it has.
Yep.
So this is a cool thing that oftentimes people who are maybe not builders and not really aware of how it functions when you combine it with steel. So concrete is a fascinating thing that it is incredibly strong under compression, and it's actually not great under tension. Whereas steel typically is not fantastic under compression because it will warp and buckle, but under tension, when you pull on it, super, super strong. So the combination of the two, if you consider just a beam, let's say I had like a 12-inch tall beam that was 4 feet long, sitting on bearing points on either end. And if I load this, there's no rebar, no steel in it. If I load this thing up on top with weight, it's going to crack in the center. It's going to break apart. So the portion where there's tension is in the bottom edge of the concrete. If I put a wire bar, a piece of rebar at the very bottom, now all of that weight pushing down on the concrete is transferred into resistance, into tension on that piece of rebar. And as that's trying to fail in the center, the concrete is pushing against itself. It's under compression on top. So the combination of those two is incredibly integral to the strength of any structure that we're building. The location of the steel in the concrete is what is super, super critical. You can put a pile of rebar in concrete in the wrong location, and you have just thrown it away. You've made a completely useless structure out of it. So the location of the steel in the concrete, incredibly crucial. And the combination of the two allow the building of structures that are mind-boggling. I cannot believe. So my wife and I, we took our oldest daughter to New York for a grad trip. She graduates this year, so we took her to New York. She's done plays and stuff, so we took her and did a couple Broadway shows and took a couple days walking around New York. And I've been to several big cities, but New York is like no other place I've been. This the scope and size and the architecture of that place is bonkers. I'd love to go to like Dubai someday too and see that place, but the size of these buildings and the height that they are, concrete is damn heavy. And you think that the higher you go, the more you need, the more weight that is up there. We were up on the Edge Observatory. That's the highest observatory deck in the Western Hemisphere. And I think it's the Hudson train station building. It doesn't have a great name for the building, but there's the Edge, which is this observation deck. It's on the 100th floor. And it's this wedge-shaped, like pizza pie section of this deck that sticks out off the building, and it sticks out off the building. I think it's like 100 feet. Like if you look up from below, this thing is hanging out over the streets below, and there's a section of the floor that's glass. And so 100 stories off the ground. I said 100 feet, 100 stories off the ground. So it's like 1,000 feet up, and you're hanging out cantilevered over the city, and you can see it is bizarre to me that it's physically possible. And that's done with the combination of steel and concrete. It's unreal. So that kind of comes back to, the different mixes that are very specific, the types of rebar that are used, and the way that it's all engineered to work together to create these different structures. My wife and I also went down to Las Vegas to go to World of Concrete. And she was like, World of Concrete? What is this like? How is this a big thing? I'm like,
how did you trick me into this?
Yeah. And then when we get there, she's like, oh, this is huge. This is so big. Like, why? Why is it so big? Like, because look around. Everything, our world is built out of concrete. What it does, like it's everywhere. It's so taken for granted. But it's how everything that we take for granted is constructed. It's unreal.
And it doesn't really change a lot. Right?
No.
Like the rebar is still going in. The
Yeah.
constituents are relatively the same.
Yeah.
Some things try to replace, but like, we have some rebar replacing fibers that we use, but they are replacing to a point. There's still spots where you just can't get away without the rebar, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, and this might be, you might have already explained this and I just didn't pick it up, but how, like, cement, and you said cement is just rock and sand?
No, the concrete's made with rock, sand, cement.
Sorry.
Cement's the paste that binds it together.
Cement is the paste. So what is cement? Like what? Because part of me, why I'm asking is like if I go on YouTube and I watch some guy living in the jungle and they can make these mud bricks and they build these little places. But again, it's so different, right? Because they're like, water, some clay, and then but it's brittle. But like what's actually happening?
It's the limestone, the binder of the cement. That the paste is what's grabbing it. It's the glue. So that's what the chemical reaction is, that paste mixing and hydrating with the water. So when your concrete's on the ground and sitting there and it's in its wet state, the hydration process hasn't started yet. So the water needs to come up out of the concrete slowly and reacts. So that's why the outside, the wind, the sun, all those elements factor, right? So the water, generally speaking, it's on poly that doesn't have any holes in it. And so the water's got to come up. It can't go down. So it's got to come up and it's got to do the process on its own. Can't be rushed because someone has to leave. It can't be, and that's what you see.
And so cement is made out of?
The limestone and quarries.
So it's a limestone product mixture that gets added to it. And I've also heard that, and this could be not true, that it continues to harden more and more, like it never stops hardening, or is there a certain time, like you said, after 28 days or 50, whatever?
Yeah, so that's going to be dependent on your fly ash. So if you were to look at a bar graph on strength gain on concrete, if you had 100% cement mix, it would take off like a shot in 17 days up to 28, and it would reach, and then it would peter off and stop, and it won't go any farther. With fly ash, it just will continue to gain.
Typically, you're looking at the concrete will have achieved its level of required strength after 28 days.
Okay.
Beyond that, it'll continue to gain strength. Just the curve, it gains less strength.
Cement will peter out. Fly ash will just continue to grow. Yeah. But cement is always able to be hydrated. So like back east, what they do is crushed concrete, which we've started to see more of it out here, but it was really like what are you talking about when I first mentioned it like 15 years ago? If you crush the concrete, and they're using that for road base because the cement is still on the material. Once you wet it down again, it'll just rehydrate. Cement will always rehydrate.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you could crush up any concrete and put water back on it. The the hydration process will start again because the cement is always looking for water.
And so with the rebar, and obviously like years ago, I don't know how long rebars existed, but you always see people throwing in metal scraps, whatever, they'll just chuck stuff in there. What's some of the craziest things you've seen that someone, like you come to a site and they've just got like all the metal and they're throwing stuff in left, right, and center?
Kitchen sinks. Yeah. Anything steel. How about that? I've seen in concrete.
We used to live in Headley as kids.
Yeah.
And there's the ruins of the old mine on the side of the mountain. We lived in a trailer at the base of that, and we played in those ruins as kids all the time. And it's all rubble and broken and breaking down now. And there's chunks of, where they had all these concrete walls all over the place. And it's all crumbled and broken, and there's giant rocks in it, and there's pieces of pipe and scrap. Yeah. There's just all kinds of debris because it just adds tensile strength and holds it together.
Yeah, and I mean, back in the day too, really large rocks, huge rocks, boulders. And you can actually reduce your cement a bit with that if your aggregate increases too. So there could have been some of that going on if they were that chemically advanced then too. But I mean, you look at old foundations. I know my house, when I cut the windows in there, I mean the foundation's got rocks in it. They're like 6-inch minus in there, right? So handy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So then, like some other mixes, just to make people aware too, things that are additives that are added to the mix. So we oftentimes will add smaller rock. So if we're doing ICF, insulated styrofoam forms, for instance, there's a mix you're supposed to use, and like an ICF mix, which will have smooth, round, smaller rocks, so it flows in places. A lot of guys don't bother using it, and you can get away with it. But then you have this jagged rock that if you're using a pump and you're bouncing it off the wall like you're supposed to, it'll actually carve holes in the styrofoam. So there's an ICF mix that I always wanted to use, which would use smaller, smoother rock and plasticizer, so it flowed really nice. You can add fiber mesh into the concrete, which is basically like almost like little fuzz. You can see it on the concrete.
Fiberglass, yeah.
Terry.
Yeah.
And that actually creates more tensile strength within the concrete and doesn't take the place of rebar, but it helps in keeping things holding together. We've also added delay. So if it's really hot out, chemicals that you'll add that delay the chemical reaction for a set amount of time. So you have time to work with the concrete. And there's also accelerators. In the wintertime, oftentimes we're like, this is going to take forever because it's cold out, and we can add accelerator and you can speed it up. Or if you're doing a tall wall, we did this at a pour, I helped buddy out a little while ago, where we had a 12-foot high wall. And I said, let's pour the first like 6.5 feet of that wall with accelerator in it so that stiffens up so we can do the rest of the pour. By the time we come around for our second course, then that is stiffened up and we pour our top lift on top, and then we vibrate, make sure we stitch those two layers together, but then there's less stress applied to the forms.
Yeah.
So like those are the ones that I've worked with and I'm aware of. And then I think it's, it's more complicated than that, but those are kind of the most common ones, and you can push those extremes pretty far in certain situations.
Yeah. Certainly we've delayed a load overnight before.
That long?
Yeah. I've been involved in accidentally delaying a load for days actually before too. So
And still
in
used
a
it?
wall. Yeah. A couple walls, I think, actually, if I think about it.
Is the delay-
it was a little late for that. Yeah, it was in the wall already.
So, and is there, to delay something that long, will that totally screw it up, or is it still going to be
Not
fine?
unless you strip the walls before it's set.
Then you got problems.
Then you'll definitely have to do something more there. Otherwise, if you can just wait, then it'll go. But
Sure.
you got to wait. You got to wait.
Yeah. And then, okay, so now the ways that it's mixed, you can do it in a wheelbarrow by hand. You can get a mixer, dump all your elements in there and mix it in there. It can be mixed in the back of a truck, in the back of your mixer truck, a mixer. And it can be a wet load, like you said, that type of plant where it's mixed on site.
Yep.
And then like for giant projects like dam construction, they'll actually have their own ready mix plant on site.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then
they might even be doing a wet batch, and they might be putting, that's when you'll see like, it looks like they're using dump trucks.
Yeah. And then there's always the KitchenAid, some people, if you need to.
Still see the hand mixers out there. I always accuse those guys of trying to go in a competition with me.
That's awesome.
So, it's to the point of the fibers too. There's a couple different types. There's a lot of different manufacturers, but essentially those fibers, like the fiberglass ones, they are strictly for reducing your shrinkage cracking. So setting up too quick when you get all that little bit of crazing cracking on your surface, if the concrete goes too quick, those are supposed to stop that shrinkage cracking from happening. It's supposed to stop. That's an ideal world. It's ideal conditions too. So if you're doing concrete outside in the Okanagan in the summertime, you can stick those shrinkage reducing fibers in there, but there's no guarantee that they're going to even show up at the end of when the job's done.
That's right. I know a lot of those locations too, like the worst parts of those inside corners that crack off that. And what our practice was in the last bunch of years was any of those inside corner locations, for the slabs, often fiber mesh is added. And then we'd put multiple diagonal bars across those sections too, because as that slab is setting, and things are shrinking, it's pulling away from itself. So it always cracks those inside corners. So by laying bars, 2 or 3 of them, 4 footers or so across those corners, you've resisted that shrinkage and that pull on the concrete.
Yeah, you've certainly tried. We've actually had a really, really good success with an admixture that kind of fights that. So really, really good results out of it for interior slabs or topping mixes. So,
is it a version of fiber mesh?
No, it's a chemical, an admixture that we put in there. And what it does is it works with positive pressure. So when your concrete starts to shrink up and tries to make itself smaller, which induces the cracking, it actually pushes out on the concrete and reduces that. So, I've used it on my own place, my own countertops. I've used 3 floors of 6 floors of concrete on a place we built. And basically you can't find a crack in the place. So we've used that It's customers. It's not cheap. It's about 60, 65 bucks a meter. But I mean, if you're doing finished floors, that at the end of the day, I always say that, you know, I'll hear 60, you know, hey, where are you at with your costs and your budget here? I mean, really, if you're going that far and you're spending that much money and this is what you want to be finished.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, try it and put it in there. And so I use my own place actually as an example. I've had many customers up to my place that we built up at Apex, this ski hill there, to see like, you know, this is the results we've had, and they've been remarkable. But yeah, so that's one admixture I can say that's really in the entire time I've been doing this that I would promote that's outside of the plasticizer, you know, delay accelerators.
Yeah,
that's about the only one.
Yeah. In regards to how it's delivered, so obviously it can show up on a truck and get dumped in a wheelbarrow and you cart it up by hand. There's also line pumps, which are miserable but have their place, and then there's overhead pumps, which unfold and give you access to everywhere on a site typically. But that delivery can also be complicated by weather and road restrictions. So there's a location south of us, up Heritage Hills, where I've done several builds up there, and East Side Road in the wintertime, there's weight restrictions on that road.
In the spring, yeah.
Yeah, so we've had times where we got a foundation ready to go. Great, let's get the pump here. I'm like, nope, pump can't drive that road. Like, well, then what? Well, then you use a line pump. And you're like, oh, bugger me, we got 12-foot walls around this whole foundation.
I hope the local guy's here because he's going to be the only one that we want to come out here and do this. Yeah, the local pump coming.
Yeah, so then he shows up with the line pump, and they're laying all the lines on the ground and lift up to the walls, and there's this great big kind of horseshoe
candy cane deal
at the top that hooks on the thing, and you're dragging it along. And then the load sizes in the trucks have to be smaller because they can have so much weight. Like, it's such a pain in the neck. And then, you deal with winter and snow, and we live in a very mountainous, hilly location, so access into places.
Road restrictions are something that a lot of people do not, they don't know. They don't.
Yeah.
When I talk to people outside of here, they would say to me, other ready-mix guys, what? How long, where are those on? Well, pretty much everywhere except the highway, you know, and they're still on a Green Mountain Road right now. So they came on a month early this year, and you don't have any idea, indication of when they're going to go off. There's all kinds of speculation, but no one will tell you until they actually come off. You know, you're watching the emails come out, but yeah, they're crushing, especially to Naramata for us. You know, you're already driving 45 minutes around the lake to go over there, and then you're taking a part load.
Yeah.
No kidding.
That's tough.
That sucks.
And what it does is it eliminates, you know, your smaller trucks are almost not usable, right? Because you're looking at like 2.5 meters in those trucks too.
How do you clean out a truck after you've emptied a load?
Well, if it's going to be reloaded, then the driver would wash in with his hose, kind of clean off the fins. It's really important to try and get the back side of the fins in the back of the truck. So
fins, you gotta explain that. So inside
blades
the mixer.
inside the mixer, right? So it's the blades are supposed to be the
like
fins
corkscrew inside.
Exactly. They're supposed to be made so that it kneads the concrete forward and throws it. So it's all mixing. So over time, if your truck starts to wear out, you think about just a barrel with no fins in it going around and around and around, right? The concrete would just sit there and it doesn't get mixed, right? So it's really important that your fins are maintained. They're cleaned back and front, not just the part that you can see, because the other side of it's really where the problem is. So, you know, maintaining that, but if they wash properly and wash the fins, then when they get back and they're done for the day, we go into a washout, we fill the drum full of water, they do a couple of water rinses, discharge, fill it again, discharge.
Okay.
You know, if you had a long day and it's built up, you could fill it full of 20 mil rock and just mix that inside there for a while, and it cleans it pretty good. But we get in. We can't, but we have a company that comes out. We get them out every probably 3 or 4 months. They're from the coast. They make a trip through here to Alberta, and they do a loop all the time. So we'll just get on the list, and they come in, jackhammer out the drums, and clean them for us. Okay. And so we, you know, that's a bit of a reactionary thing. Often we just have a maintenance program where we just have them out every few months. Like, you know, within 6 months, every 6 months they're here again. Okay. You know, just cleaning the trucks, because again, for us, it's about the quality of the product. I need those trucks to not be spitting out pieces of concrete. That's what's going to happen, right? If you have concrete built up on the drum and then they start to discharge, especially when we get the shoulder season where there's warm water all of a sudden going in, the steel starts to contract, and you'll get huge pieces just come snaking out the back of the truck if you're not maintaining. So yeah, maintaining so we get proper mix.
And that's oftentimes when you have a plug in the pump.
Oh yeah.
Is that there's a chunk that's popped off of a fin, got into the mixer.
Not even a rock often. It's not
Yeah.
even, it's just a piece of precast that we call it, that's come off the truck and been missed. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so process of start to finish of ordering and placing concrete, just to kind of gallop through that. So typically speaking, a builder, an engineer, mainly a builder or a homeowner, are going to be the ones that get in touch with you, say we need concrete.
Yep.
And they've got to have the order volume and the specs.
Ideally.
Is what you need.
Well, yep. We'd prefer for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Generally it would be, I need a truck. I'm looking for a truck and it's looking like, I don't know, it's like 2.5, 3 trucks. You know, if it's walls, they're deceivingly hard to calculate, I've learned. And seem to change. They can really be, hard target to hit. It seems like for measuring walls, because we will get people that have trouble measuring that. The slabs, definitely variations. Often it's such a rush, as you know, that we've got a fella trying to book in a slab, but the prep hasn't even been completed yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you come here, don't worry, it'll be 4 inches. Okay, well, I'll be back here in 3 days. And I come there, now it's 4.5, 5 inches deep. All of a sudden the volumes are changing.
It's 20%.
Or it's 3%, 3 inches. And now we've got too much concrete going out. So, I would say that the ordering is the biggest struggle for us, because we're unable, without proper information, to properly provide service.
Yeah.
And we might be all right. We can only guarantee the 7 o'clock orders, because after that, you're at the mercy of the person that did before you. So I've heard lots of times like, oh my gosh, I booked the pump. Why aren't you guys here? Well, I don't know what to tell you. Unless you book 7 o'clock, I can't guarantee 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't even know where we'll be at that point. And I've actually said to people, hey, I'll give you the gas guy's number. You can call him and give him heck for taking too long with the pump. What do you want? I don't know what to tell you, So it's the communication. It's knowing. It's not good enough to just phone and say, I need a truck. Is that a 6 meter? Is it a 10 meter? Could I now use the 10 meter another job that it turned out, or you didn't need that? So it's the information. It's like anything else. It's a struggle to get that, but everybody's trying to do, it's not just specific to 1 or 2 customers. Everybody's trying. When you get a customer who's organized, yeah, that stands out. That it's very evident, but unfortunately there's a less percentage of that.
That's the exception.
Yeah.
When it comes down to like ordering and volume and specifications, so MPA and that, have you run into times where wrong MPA was used and then that gets
ordered? Yeah, absolutely. I can't say that. Well, I've had so on a smaller scale, like a residential application, I've had for sure where people have used the wrong MPA, the 25 MPA for their shed slab. You can, you try to catch it. But we've definitely had it on larger scales. I could give you an example of a commercial project that we've actually now took over and started supplying. And the guy ordered, we've got to watch him when he orders, because he's ordered 25 MPA for his parkade slab, and that's got to be 32. We're not messing around here in a commercial building, right? So,
no kidding.
But you see that a lot. There's, you referenced the trades, learning concrete or going to school, but I actually used to do something with the college in Penticton. A fellow that ran the program down there, trades would come over and I'd do a little concrete thing for them once a year, or 2 days of Cole's notes, really, of thrust you into the concrete of kind of, this is what you got, because they used to indicate that there was not really a lot of aspect covered in that. And you see that when it comes out, right? There's so many different ways to try and calculate the concrete, so, dealing with ordering, knowing what they need, it's educating, and people that have been doing this for a long time don't necessarily want to be questioned on what they're ordering, or be told that that's not really ideal, so it's tricky that way. But the biggest thing I would say is that people are generally open to, I got to do some stairs or a slab, and we'll just tell them, this is what you need to have for that. But contractors typically know.
Another one that can be tricky is like pump scheduling. Now, with your new plant, you got 6 trucks now. Do you guys have 8 trucks? Do you guys have plans to get your own pump?
Yeah, every plan is dependent on a warm body to, not just a warm body with work boots on, but you need the right people to do that around, right? So, having run a pump, you just can't make that step until you know you got someone. You can't just go ahead and proceed down that road. Would we? Yeah, we'd love to, but I would need the right person to be able to put it in there, right?
So the right person comes
can't
up.
just have a cowboy out there, getting it done safely. So right person comes up, then it's definitely a possibility. The what we had at my old place with that, like you spoke to with the pump, was that we were able to control that aspect, right? So even currently now, we are out front and say, hey, we are not responsible for the pump, but we will 100% organize it for you. If you have someone you want to use, we'll organize it with them. If you don't care, then we'll find a pump and get it out there too. But it's better for us to be able to control that show up time, right? So we're going to book at 1:00. I got a pump booked already. You guys can make that? Yeah, sure. Okay. But the pump, what happens now? Now the pump company's delayed. So who's he calling? Does he know who's even bringing the concrete to the job, right? So we really try to get our hands on that. But that's, again, and you're also adding in that element of the pump, and a lot of them are coming from the north. So that time of arrival could be, who knows, right?
Oh, we've had that so many times, where there's a delay and then there's an accident or something.
Oh,
and you guys are on site ready to go and the pump isn't even there. Like, what is going on?
Vice versa, yeah.
And then you're like on a Friday and you're like, well, we're the third people to pour today. We want to be out of here on a Friday, hopefully in good time. And then we're sitting around for 3 hours waiting, like, okay, it's going to be a late one, fellas. Sorry, everybody.
That's one of the things that is kind of frustrates you when you hear, which is very common. Hey, I got a pump booked for Thursday. Can you guys supply? That is very common. Be like, cart to end horse. So
you got to have both those phone calls and be like, hypothetically, will this work? How about you? Okay, now let's get everybody talking.
If I need concrete, I need more than one truck. To me, you'd organize that portion because it seems like a tougher thing to do. And then coordinate through, hey, this is a couple of options. But no, it's usually call the pump truck first and then call the concrete company to try and see if you guys can get there. Or you're going to have a pump sitting there. We better bring concrete,
So what happens when someone orders way too much concrete? Oops. So they still pay for it. What happens with that concrete?
Well, it's either repurposed or it would come back and it goes into blocks at the yard. So we reuse it. That's where the big concrete blocks are from. Yeah.
Okay. So, that makes sense. Because part of me was thinking like, well, obviously it's going to harden. Do you have a spot that you just dump all your excess? But making all those blocks. Would most places do that then?
Yeah.
You
Some would have a reclaimer too that they would dump it in and then pull all the constituents back out.
You can do that.
Yeah, you could dilute it in there and use a reclaimer. Yeah.
I didn't know that was
for blocks though. For us, you see my yard. So
you run out of room.
We've never purposely made a meter of concrete to make a block.
Yeah.
So
interesting. So so there is something though that can actually separate the aggregate, all those different things. And
so even like in a washout pit, when the truck's emptying out after, he's going to have sand, rock, there's going to be residual in there.
Sure.
So essentially the washout is just diluting the whole thing out and then trying to make the cement go to, put it to sleep for a while. So then afterwards you clean out the washout, you've got your rock and the water separates, you haul the rock and the materials away for the washout, and the water sometimes repurposed depending on your setup.
Oh, that's cool.
So you can actually reuse the washout water. In some places they do that, but washout water with cement in it is like add an accelerator a bit as water.
To what degree does someone say, hey, I need you to pour over top of this, and that it's not the way it's supposed to be? Do you guys have the right, I guess, or
I just told somebody last week that we wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's
3/4 of an inch. Yeah. No, there's products out there that concrete's not the product for your 3/4 inch overlay.
No. Or if there's things that they're pouring over that you're like, I'm sure be
for sure. Yeah.
Like a body or something.
Well, we wouldn't be too concerned about that, but more about bad material where we're buying properly.
Yeah. As long as there's no fingers sticking up.
We're
cover it completely.
No. For sure to catch that. But again, there are people out there that have been in this industry for a long time, and they've been that's how they do things. So you try to. It's like anything else. You try to control your customer base and maybe steer certain ones in different directions, right? So there's other suppliers.
I was going to go through kind of critical details to the whole process, but I think we've kind of talked through them, like communication, good planning, site access. We haven't really talked about. Well, I guess we did with winter and overhead power lines. Sometimes you think, oh, great, easy thing, got a pour to do.
Yeah, no.
Truck shows up like, I can't pour. I'm like, what are you talking about? Power lines. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh shoot, you
Yeah.
need a line pump. No, that's a rude awakening.
And from running my time running a pump too, is you really became aware of how unaware some job sites are. And and it's like they know the pump's coming. They're gonna pour the walls. They're ready to do 40 meters, and you show up at the pump, and you're going to go, where did you guys want me to set up? And it's like they're surprised that the pump is there, right?
Yeah.
And I always go, aren't you got material here already? Like, where did the crane truck set up to dump that off? Right? Yeah, it was over there, but we did this now. Okay, well, yeah. So often that's the case. The concrete too, like it's for us heavy trucks. It's really important for us to make sure that we're backing in where we're supposed to be, especially if it's existing. Just that site access it's always a bit of a concern in some places. Trucks are big. People don't I can remember going to a pump job in Naramata, and for the first time to try and see where the pump would sit for a house, I drove down a row of fruit trees and marked out where my stabilizers were, then came back a week later and they dug out the spots for my said stabilizers, pumped the footings, pumped the foundation, went back there about 8 months later and the orchard was gone. And I was parked on the asphalt pouring the side parking area for this guy's car. So, here we are super concerned about, saving everything around here and keeping it pristine the way it was. And then, 8 months later, it's out the window. It's every site's different.
What's the worst blowout you've seen? I'd be curious. And just for those that don't know what a blowout is, it's not changing your kid's diaper. It's can be pretty costly and pretty scary.
Yeah, well, I would say you're definitely going to have to go to the high flow mixes. So it's either going to be ICF or an SCC, which is self-compacting concrete, which is a super liquid mix. If you got a hole like that, it's kind of like the Dutchman with the dam there, and I've seen that on gang forums where it happened one time years ago, and everybody just starts running for it pretty much because you've got about a 20-foot form that's starting to make noise. But otherwise, ICF, when we started doing ICF, when I was first with the original company before we were bought out, we were doing the Adobe style house out here at the Bluffs, McIntyre. And we would go out there, and the owner of the company that I worked for, he had sold the ICF and everything. And it was in its infancy stages then, because I actually sell the product now, but they didn't have corners. So you had to make all your own corners, right? So every corner looked like it was made out of wood. Yeah. And if you didn't, it would by the time you were done pouring, because it would have been covered back up, right? And I can remember never really knowing anything about ICF and going up there, 6-meter trucks loading, and it's like 40 meters and we're making it wet and they're pumping it in there, and then you get a blowout and it's like, stand there and they'd watch it as it's shooting out of the wall and wait for it to stop and then put a piece of plywood up. But I can remember always adding like another 6-meter truck to the order every time, because you just knew there was going to be, and then we'll go out and fill up after the blowouts. Like no balance load. It was just a blowout load. We'll go back down. Yeah. And we know we'll go for that. So we'll get ready for it. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. I mean, I would say those aren't that bad. I think the worst blowout I ever seen that really kind of was like, got me, was when the concrete didn't set up one time and the guy stripped the wall and then the concrete fell down 2 days later, just kind of sloughed out of the wall. But
crazy.
Yeah. That was more like, I wish that didn't go very well. But
yeah.
The truck broke down under the plant. That was at the old place.
Yeah.
When I first started, and the truck broke down under the plant, and at the plant I was pumping, just started pumping there at the old pump truck, and not knowing anything really about concrete other than now the truck's not coming, and now what do I do? And they delayed it at the yard like haphazardly, I think, and then eventually it came, and we pumped it in the wall, and then that was like a day and a half later, whatever, the guy stripped it. I remember going back there to the slab and seeing the wall. Yeah, it just fell out, be like a kid with his ice cream, probably, right? You're like, just,
like one of those fancy cake shows, and then it doesn't set quite right.
It did not just fell apart. Over, right? The slow motion.
So would the top have been crusty? So you're like, okay, yeah, it's good. And then you pull it off, and the under part was like underbaked, basically?
Yeah, well, he might, that was like 20 years ago. I would say that I think maybe there was another truck that came. So after that, so he poured it, and then the last truck came with the balance load and topped it up. So it's good up here, but then in the middle down there, it's not so good. So that's kind of like ICF, right? But the ICF, the reason you want a good mix, the reason you want it to flow is because you can't see what's going on inside that flow. Right. So I know of legitimate stories where guys have taken an infrared gun because somebody ordered, say 40 meters and they got to 32 and they're like, we're done.
Yeah.
You're done? Are you sure you're done? Yeah. Well, then an infrared gun and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a void over here, right? Or I've heard about people going into the styrofoam, running into it and then like actually breaking it and then what's going
Nothing
where's
in
the concrete in here?
Yeah.
So I for sure seen that up at that project you did below that one a couple of years ago. There's a couple of just unbelievable examples of that. And they're actually stuck my head up inside the corner to see what it had gone wrong. And that again, just not installed properly.
For those of you watching and listening who are unaware, ICF, the styrofoam forms, there's styrofoam forms. These are the styrofoams around 2.5 inches thick on either side. You set them up, you pour concrete in, and you never strip it. That you put siding over top and drywall over it. So if you have like a great big window or something, and you've got a big window buck built around it, if you don't actually have holes drilled in the bottom of the buck like you should, so you can vibrate and pull all that concrete up, you can pour concrete and there's big voids that you never see because you don't strip it. So there's a whole bunch of practices you have to be really careful of. And then if it's not done properly, your house is actually bearing on styrofoam. There's no concrete in there.
There's a couple houses those two houses specifically I went back to a few months later after I took a bunch of photos, because there's actually the same ICF that I didn't sell was sold at the coast and brought down here, and sent pictures and said, either you're not going to sell this anymore. You're not going to sell it here for sure anymore, because you better get this covered up, because anybody who drives by here and sees this is going to think it's the foam, not, the contractors. But the part that always makes me shudder is that I've been by those houses now, and I was actually by there a few months ago, and they're actually now the last piece to cover up was the door. But if you hadn't driven by that when I took those pictures or hadn't seen that house, people would be completely unaware that foundation is like that.
Yeah.
Because they've framed all around it now.
So how do you fix a void like that? You just kind of like,
it'd be same as conventional. You'd have to go and you'd have to build a spot and get it filled in.
Yeah, sure.
I've seen that, like, so snow is like that, right? Snow inside the foundation walls. You think, oh, it's December, I've got piping hot concrete, I'll dump this concrete in there and melt that bit of snow on the ground. But that is exactly what will not happen. Is that concrete will not melt your snow. So I've seen that too. A peach sand job when I was pumping, the guy poured the concrete in there to melt the snow, should have done it differently, didn't. And then we go back, he strips the wall, and the bottom 2 feet of the wall doesn't even have any concrete. Just sat on the snow and then built up on top.
Yeah, I've seen that before, where you got like 2 inches at the bottom of the wall.
It's amazing
that the whole thing is suspended on rebar, and there's 2 inches there.
It's amazing.
We had one job in Penticton where we got snow overnight. We hadn't have it covered, and I didn't want that to happen, so we actually got a full truck of hot water, and ran that through the pump, and we pumped hot in the middle of the friggin' winter. And I remember Justin was on the pump, and he was just soaked, and it's freezing cold out. We're pumping hot water to melt all the snow, get that done. Then we poured the concrete, used up all the hot water the plant had.
And you could send out concrete completely out of spec and way too hot, and he still would not melt the snow down there.
It packs and insulates.
No kidding.
It's crazy.
I thought for sure. I mean, I can understand why someone would be like, well, it gets so hot, of course it'll melt.
No, not till after, when it's set
and
up
even just not at all either, right? It cannot penetrate that snow in small amounts.
We've talked a little bit about the weather, just to kind of make people understand, if they're unaware of like how unforgiving concrete is. Like, having worked with lots of finishers and all these buildings, and having worked in the Okanagan summers here and doing footings and these kind of flash sets, you got a cloudy, cool day, the clouds break, wind comes up, sun comes out, all of a sudden you're like mad panic, like, we got to get this flat at least. And then you got finishers who are like finishing slabs, and the worst times when it's like, shoulder seasons and the sun's getting low and there's shadows cast over their slab. And like, over here is set and done, this is still wet, and there's this line of the shadow, and I'll be here till 1 a.m. getting this stupid side done because it just won't set. Super unforgiving to either take too long, and having the knowledge to know how to read the concrete and what to do where and how, and when you guys start throwing water on it to soften up, they can make it workable, which then it'll spall later on, which that top surface is weak and it'll flake off. Like, it's such an unforgiving discipline to work with, and you need to read it so well. And I think I've heard from some reliable sources that like concrete finishers and people who deal with that as a trade is like the most stressful trade that you can have, because the costs, the implications are so high, it can go so bad, and you're always at the mercy of the concrete and the weather, and these variables it's so hard to stay on top of.
Mhm.
It's such a learnt trade
Yeah, it
for a
is.
certain kind of person.
Yeah, and it's an uber important to be learnt by someone who has learnt. Right?
Mm.
So there's in the industry, it's like there's a lot of participants that are not really fully understanding of what they have their hands in,
Sure.
which is, to me, I always found alarming, coming from not knowing and then learning and then knowing guys who you'd assumed they did. And then you might, make a comment like, oh, I want to make sure the air is right there. Or, you're going to be, what are you guys doing in there out here at the wineries? So crush pads or anything like that, you want to, there's different types of cement, but like an HS, which is a high sulfate. So it's resistant to the sulfates from the wine, and it will eat the concrete up. So, and in certain spots, like in Kamloops, their footings are all 32 MPa because of the grounds up there. So they want a high sulfate. So yeah, just amazing that some folks are getting through it, but not really aware. I mean, I feel like they're lucky in a sense. If you're not fully understanding what's going on with that process there, it's important because you can mess it up really easy. Yeah. It's not, you can't just always say it's the concrete's fault, So
I think there's only two other things that I was going to say. One was, I think it was Ron, who was the pump driver, that told us about the one site he went to, and they had used tie wire to save money instead of ties.
They had tie wire through the tie holes and wrapped it around the Whaler bar.
Did they end up paying that instead? They end up paying the concrete company for the ties they didn't use because they used more concrete, or how'd that work?
It blew apart.
It blew apart.
He says,
go ahead. Well, again, I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. But as far as he got there, and he's like, "This is not going to work," but they were adamant. That were like, "No, we've done this before," and they weren't they like 10 foot high.
They had some height to them. I can't remember how high.
Yeah. And he said that, okay, sure enough. So, and after they got about maybe,
he was shocked how high he got it. Yeah. He's like, this is like, it's working. But then it was like a zipper.
It was like dominoes, like all of a sudden one went tink, 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 tink. And then he just basically hands up and the whole thing, both sides came down, concrete, covered everything. And he just drove away.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Yeah.
Like, what do you do?
We're done here.
Yeah.
On to the next one.
Yeah.
See you next time.
I didn't say I was going to leave it in the wall. I'm just going to pump it into the wall. But where it goes from there is not my problem.
I mean, again, he probably could have driven away and be like, I'm not doing this.
If that's the fella you're talking about, I imagine he probably got down there and shoveled it and started helping put it all back together.
Yeah.
So,
that guy he was a gem.
Yeah. Oh, what a gem.
And then similar to our line pump local operator, when you were mentioning about having to, we got a line pump walls. There's only one guy that shows up with a line pump with a smile on his face still and gets out there and works like that. So
the only other one that I could think of concrete wise that we went through that we weren't actually part of, we helped frame the house, but was a basement that got a floor. A guy just basically decided to he was going to finish it all himself.
Oh, awesome.
And it was just too big of a job. And I think what happened is the driver was like, yeah, well, we have some left in there. And he said, okay, just pump it down into the basement. And he went to another room and was working on it, and then came back out and didn't realize that he gave them the all clear just to dump the rest of the truck in there. And there was this huge mound in his basement, and
he basically ended up
showpiece.
He basically raked his slab flat with a yard rake as best he could. And then
I've seen that finish before.
Sat on the stairs and cried, and then had to pay to have it all redone after putting 10 inches of concrete in.
Yep.
It was
it's like he basically lost almost a foot of ceiling height because it was so full. Had to recut the studs on the bottom and the whole thing and do a big slush coat. And
it's not for the faint of heart. It's the internet that's told everyone that they can. I kind of blame the hardware stores for saying you can do it, we can help. Because there's some things you shouldn't.
Yep.
And
agreed.
It's your lane is important to be.
We can do it. You can help.
Yeah, we can do it. You can do it, but you shouldn't.
You shouldn't help.
Yeah, that's right. And we're not going to help you do that.
Let us do it. You shouldn't help.
Yeah. Let us show you a contractor who you can call. Yeah. But I mean, same. There's certainly those people out there that can do it. So we see that too. But
sure.
It's interesting.
Well, this is a Friday, and I know you got lots going on. Thank you so much for carving out a little bit of time to come and visit with us.
Yeah, it was
and
nice to
chat through
finally
it.
get it done at least. Yeah,
That's great. So thank you so much for coming in. I wish you all the best with the plant. I'm looking forward to come
Thanks.
over and get a little tour of what you
anytime.
got going on there.
Come see it.
And
Something.
yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Brad, again.
Yep.
Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. We'll catch you again next time.